today, Attorney General Pam Bondi has directed her staff that the DOJ is going to launch a grand jury investigation into the Russia conspiracy, the Russia hoax, however you want to call it, saying that they were planting the seeds, that the Democrats were planting the seeds to create that Russia hoax very early on. This is another big moment. Now, no charges have been brought at this stage of the investigation against any potential defendants, it says. However, that doesn't mean that won't happen, and this is a big deal. I think we need to look at it from a outsider's perspective. Would you ever have thought you would have seen this from any other administration?
That's right. I think this is the turning point that everyone had been looking for, because we'd been hearing things from Tulsi Gabbard for a few weeks, from the director of the CIA, John Ratcliffe, and a lot of it was like, shocking, things that we assumed happened, but seeing it from intelligence documents and things like that have been declassified was shocking to see that what the government had in their possession and how they framed it and how they decided to stage this, as Tulsi Gabbard calls it, years-long coup. And then the natural thought was, well, what's going to happen about it? Will we ever see accountability? Because that's how Washington has worked for so long.
And I was on here saying, probably not. You know, it's kind of one of those guys that didn't want to be a negative Nelly over here, Will, but I've seen too much. And I've seen how Washington, D.C. works. And often people are not held to any sort of accountability. Usually names are not named. And there are big moments that just kind of fall flat. But it seems like Pam Bondi's not doing that.
Right. This is the hopeful turning point where now a prosecutor, we don't know the name of which U.S. attorney has been tasked with this, and which is normal. We are getting this because a source told the media that this has happened, but that they have been tasked with gathering the evidence together, putting it in the proper way to then present it to a grand jury in the hopes to get and secure indictments against individuals.
Dad, I want to get your update and your thoughts on this.
As you said, Logan, this is a big move. It's the most important, I'd say, critical move in holding people accountable for the wrongdoing that they engaged in before President Trump was president, while he was a candidate in 2015 and 16. And then, of course, for what they did, which included everything from lying to a FISA court where a DOJ lawyer actually changed evidence that was permitted, to the allegations of false testimony to the United States Congress. So what happens next is the grand jury will be in what's called impaneled, and that means they will come together and witnesses will be called and evidence will be presented. And, you know, there's a couple of lawyers that know a lot about this, and that's Jordan and me. Both of us. We have both been engaged in this case from the beginning. We knew it was a hoax. The Department of Justice at the time knew it was a hoax, and so did the intelligence community. But despite that, they brought these charges against, or brought these investigations against the president, which took up almost 3 years of his first term.
Well, people bring up, Dad, what's the difference between this and traditional, you get campaign research, going after somebody, or, doing all the things you do when you are working on an election? Of course, you have whole departments of people that are trying to dig up things or trying to find things to go after that potential candidate over. But there's a difference between that and, I guess, complete fabrication.
Well, that and complete fabrication, but also it's one thing if your political opponent's doing it. It's another if the Department of Justice is doing it. And here it was the Department of Justice working with the Clinton campaign on the Steele dossier. We know of the communications between Bruce and Nellie Orr. Remember that he was the number 4 ranked individual in the Department of Justice. You can't forget that for a moment. So when the government puts its finger on the scale, that's where there's illegality. It's not allowed to do that, both constitutionally and statutorily. So this will be an important investigation. We need to caution everybody. These things move at a regular pace. They're not expedited. But this is important. And the ACLJ has a unique role here, and that is we know a lot of the evidence because we were the lawyers at the time. And there's way for us to supplement, get information out, not just on air, but legally as well. And we will be looking at all of those options. And that's why it's so important for our members who are celebrating this month 35 years of victory to let's get another victory. We're on the beginning stages of what could be the ultimate victory as far as this politicization of the Department of Justice goes.
And when you look at, the way that Pam Bondi with the DOJ is handling this, they accepted a criminal referral from the Director of National Intelligence as well as from the CIA. They task people with it. They're going through the regular channels. They're not all of a sudden just blowing up the system, trying to make something completely different, which is what happened before. But a lot of people will also maybe looking at this and thinking, why is it so important now that there be accountability, that the truth does come out? And I think it ties directly in with the work that the ACLJ has done throughout its course, and that is protecting the Republic, protecting the Constitution. That if the truth doesn't come out about this, I think it's very damaging to the future of the Republic and the way that our government operates. I just want to get your take on that.
Yeah, it's not just that this has happened and this was bad and it shouldn't happen again. And it actually interfered with the Article 2 functions of the presidency. Remember, I was involved in, I think it ended up being 4 cases for the president at the Supreme Court of the United States, dealing with all of these issues of the government coming in. And remember, Congress subpoenaing his personal records, and we were successful in that, and the court saying you had to meet a very high standard, which they had not met. But the end result is, and I think this is what's important, the activities that took place interfered with the president's capacity to govern, or certainly made it more difficult. And that's what we can't have in a constitutional republic. And that's why people that do this have to be held accountable, so that the next group doesn't think about interfering with the presidential election because they don't like that candidate.
We're already starting to see some of the usual suspects in the more mainstream and left media say that, this is a waste of time, or that they're mischaracterizing this. One, we know that that's not true. But even we're starting to see some, and I saw it on Morning Joe this morning, where they said that this is so highly irregular that we know about this. But the reality of this is that, one, this is a source saying that there's a grand jury investigation. This wasn't a press release from the Department of Justice. We don't know who the prosecutor is. We don't even know the targets. How many times during the Trump years did we get news that there was a grand jury impaneled? So we're seeing this shock from the left all of a sudden because their narrative is crumbling. But in reality, it appears the Department of Justice is taking this very seriously and doing it through the proper and necessary channels.
Well, here's the proper and necessary channels. There was a referral from the DNI, our former colleague Tulsi Gabbard. There was a referral from our friend and former, now current CIA Director John Ratcliffe. He was a member of Congress. He was on our impeachment team. So we've got a long history with him. And they made a referral to the Department of Justice. The Department of Justice then looks at the information that's gathered, and they take it to a grand jury. I was in I think it was the Space and Science Museum, or one of the museums in Washington, D.C., when there was a phone call I got from the press. We've heard there's been 3 grand juries impaneled, one in Florida, one in California, and one in New York against the president. And they were leaking this stuff out all over the place. So, look, I mean, this is Washington. Things get out. But at the end of the day, what's important here is this is the beginning of the first phase of holding people accountable for actions they took which damaged the Republic.
Now, Will, we were talking in the break that you wanted to go over a bit of how the media is covering all of this.
That's right. Now that the truth is coming out, and now that we're seeing the actual documents, they are trying to spin this so desperately. And this is a clip from Morning Joe. I referenced it earlier with your dad, but it was so crazy to me how much spin they're trying to put on this about how bad this is, that we're finally about to see some accountability, and that we're hoping we see accountability. This is from David Rode. He was on Morning Joe. He was talking with Willie Geist, and he's the senior executive editor on national security for NBC News. And I want you to hear what he has to say, and then I'm going to break it down for you. But this is Bite 7.
We don't know what the crimes are that are alleged here. We don't know who is being targeted, and we don't know where this grand jury will sit. And all of that's, very concerning. Normally in the, prosecution process in this country, no one is indicted, no investigation is announced, or anyone is indicted before a grand jury has heard evidence and a fellow citizen decides this other citizen should be charged with a crime. Here we have an approach where there's sort of the Director of National Intelligence makes a sweeping allegation. potentially that the former president of the United States was involved in a treasonous plot. And then you have the Attorney General announcing that she is launching a criminal investigation of this plot. But again, we don't know the charges. We don't know where they're going to investigate or who it's going to be.
Here's why this is so disingenuous to me. Is he at the beginning says, we don't know what the crimes are that are alleged here. We don't know who's being targeted, and we don't know where this grand jury will sit. And all of that's very concerning. Then he goes on to say that the normal process is you wouldn't know what the alleged crimes are, who the alleged targets of the investigation are, or where the grand jury is going to sit. So he's saying that that's the normal process, but because that's the normal process, it's concerning to him. He also goes on to talk about Director of National Intelligence, who laid out the evidence to the American people, but also did a criminal referral to the Department of Justice. All that is very normal process. And then what did the DOJ do? They accepted the criminal referral and they started looking into it. This news about the grand jury investigation isn't something that they put a press release out about. It's a source told Fox News. How many times over the last 4 years, 8 years, your entire lifetime, have you seen articles that are written because a source told them a grand jury's been impaneled or a criminal referral has happened? That is par for the course out of Washington, D.C. But they are in such a tailspin right now because things that they wrote and got Pulitzer Prizes about, the lies that they perpetrated on the American people for years, and that they took as gospel truth that Russia and President Trump colluded together, no matter what any of the special counsels said, no matter what anyone after the reports put out, no matter all the clearing of wrongdoing on the president's campaign back in 2016, they still believe this lie. And if something happens that chips away at their truth, they are going into a tailspin. And that's what the problem is. They don't care about the truth. They care about their truth, which was a lie from the beginning.
You have been pushing, and I've been pushing, and we've been talking about the fact that it seems like when there were these criminal referrals, we kind of go back to a James Comey kind of universe. We go back to a universe where referrals happen, and that means nothing's going to happen. And now we have a very different administration. We have to keep reminding ourselves that we have a different group of people that are in there that are taking these things seriously. Now, whether they end up developing into something more than this, who knows? But at least we're taking that next step, which is assembling a grand jury.
Listen, if this was a Republican if they were going after Republican executive branch officials, there would be no problem in getting indictments. Mm-hmm. No problem. But because these are leftist actors, the location of the grand jury, which shouldn't be important in our system of rule of law, could be very important. And I don't want to put too much weight into that because some of that will come down to the evidence that is presented. And again, evidence can be used in grand juries that's not allowed in court. It's a very different process. That's why they use you can indict a ham sandwich in a grand jury. It's just a different process. But this is action. This is not just talking about, this is not just writing a report or investigation. But remember when John Durham went to that grand jury, was not as easy to indict as a ham sandwich. And he had trouble. That was in Washington, D.C., and then in Delaware as well. So I think what we have to see here is a little bit more of this kind of developing. Grand jury information's held pretty tight. Ultimately, we'll likely know the location of the grand jury at least. And this could lead to, again, very serious legal actions and repercussions for those who we believe were at least engaged in wrongdoing. And then the next level is, does the executive branch and Department of Justice have the evidence that they can use in court if they get through the grand jury stage and bring indictments to actually prove that it was not just wrongdoing, but criminal wrongdoing. And of course, there's some statute of limitations issues they have to get over. But as a lot of people have said, because these are individuals that are still talking about the issue, they are still very active in the issue, and it's kind of ongoing in my mind, because we're still talking about it, that a lot of those statute of limitations issues I think can be overcome.